and welcome to another episode of Finders Keepers, the podcast where we help you find the best keepers for your keeper and dynasty leagues. I'm your host Jordox, and round 16 of the AFL season was a bit of a strange one, fantasy-wise. There were a lot of lower scores from good players, and it wouldn't be a big surprise if you had a couple of upsets in your league. In my home league, I lost to the bottom side narrowly, and the side sitting second last posted the biggest score of the round. The footy itself was reasonable, but unfortunately I was quite busy with life on the weekend that I didn't get to watch as much footy as I usually do. The other thing about the weekend was it was the last of the mid-season bye rounds that have stretched on for 5 weeks now. Hopefully the AFL have a look at this next year and we get less bye rounds, because I've almost forgotten what it feels like to field a full side. This week on Finders Keepers, I'll go through the things that I noticed across the round and how they relate to keeper leagues. I'll then have a look at the waiver wire pickups for this week and the players you should be targeting. And then I'll finish with questions from the listeners, and we've got a bunch today, so I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that at the end. So round 16, what did I notice? It started on Thursday night with Port versus Carlton. And unfortunately for Carlton fans, it was more of the same, but perhaps even a little bit worse. They were quite dreadful in this game, and Port Adelaide got their game going and cruised to an easy victory. Joe Richards has put together a decent few weeks. Free Kick Liam spoke about him on this podcast last week, and he's done it again with another mid-80s score, playing as a high half forward that gets up the ground and just gets involved in the game. So he's looking really good. He's been a great pickup for Port Adelaide. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because Jack Lukosius is getting closer to returning to the side, and I actually feel like he's going to play, well, he was going to be playing a similar role to Richards. So it'll just be interesting to see the mix when the two of them are playing, but I'm loving what I'm seeing from Richards at the moment. Someone else I'm loving what I'm seeing, Miles Bergman, does it again, and this was a big score, 120. And his role in trying to get a read of what he does from week to week, it just really depends on who the Port want him to run with. So this week he tagged Paddy Cripps, which meant his CBA numbers were huge. He was at a heap of the centre bounces and did a great job, got plenty of the ball himself, just keeps on getting it done, Bergman. Manny Liddy played his third game, scored 61. I really enjoyed watching him. I think he has some pretty good footy smarts. So they picked him up in the mid-season draft. He's played the 3 games now. I reckon we're going to see him for a little bit longer yet. Now, the other interesting thing about Port Adelaide the last few weeks is they've been running with the 2-ruck setup. And I can't remember who I was talking to, someone, but last week I'd sort of mentioned Jordan Sweet, I'm pretty confident will get that number 1 spot back. Vicentini's just too young to maintain as a number 1 ruck at this point. So the two of them played together again, and it was the first sign of Sweet regaining that number 1 spot. For ruck contests around the ground, the split was 64-36% in favour of Sweet. And then when you look at the centre bounces, it was 86-14% split for Sweet. So Vicentini spent a bit of time forward. As I mentioned before, Lukosius will be back soon. And even though Vicentini avoided suspension with that bump on Sard, I wouldn't be surprised if he was rested or omitted and Sweet takes the reins solo again. For Carlton, it was a pretty dirty night for Carlton. The one thing I was pretty pleased was Cooper Lord holding his spot in the team. He got another run. He scored 61, but I think what I liked the most was at half-time they moved him into the middle and he started attending the centre bounces and started scoring okay in that position as well. So fingers crossed they can give him more of a run there. They had a couple of debutants on the night, Carlton, half-back Billy Wilson and Flynn Young as a, I think, key forward, taller type. Young was the sub. So we only had a very small look at him late in the game. And look, Wilson was okay. I thought at times he looked a likely type, but hard to get a read on either of these guys. Such was Port Adelaide's domination. Friday night, I was at a work event and missed all of Sydney versus Bulldogs, and it looked like the game of the round, an absolute cracker, with the Bulldogs prevailing. So reviewing the game, here's the things I saw that stood out to me. And firstly, Errol Goulden, welcome back. Glad to have him back. Last week was his return game. He looked okay. This is the week he got going. Hits a 124, playing mostly off the wing. Wouldn't owners just be absolutely doing cartwheels that he's back and he's already put up a big score? What a gun. Not so much the same for Callum Mills. He dropped a 67, which is a disappointing score. But the role, from what I could tell, still looked pretty good. He just had a down night. And if you recall a couple of weeks ago, Sam Doherty had a similar disappointing score and then bounced back with a 130. So yeah, Mills owners don't despair. He's missed a lot of footy. So yeah, but in terms of roles, Matty Roberts, oh dear, that role did not look good at all. So looks like he was on the wing again and was very much not involved. And I think at half time was on single figure score. Anyway, got to a 45. I don't know. I'd be pretty worried in the short term. And I wonder if maybe they rest him, or am I overreacting to a fantasy score? I could be. I guess we'll see. But yeah, we want Roberts behind the ball, racking up. We don't want him up stuck on a wing. Jake Lloyd, what a great response to being omitted. Came back into the side, pumped out a 116, playing like looked to be more of a half-forward role. Kicked 1 goal 3, so he's certainly hitting the scoreboard. Owners would absolutely take that. For the Bulldogs, Joel Freyer, 116, maybe a career game. Started at half-back and then moved forward in the second half and kicked 3 goals in a crazy third quarter and, really helped turn the game. For a second-year player, he's pretty impressive. He's having a great year. Ed Richards, 64. Probably the first truly hard tag of his career since he's really stepped up and broken out as an elite mid. And it was James Jordan, who we know can be quite the challenging tagger. And yeah, Richards really struggled. 64, probably his lowest for some time. Pretty disappointing. And then Lockie Bramble. He posted a really good score last week, but it was hard to sort of gauge if that was just because they had a big win over Richmond and everyone scored well, or if something had changed or clicked with Bramble. I mean, we know he can score well. He just also has games where he goes completely missing. Anyway, he's scored second week in a row a decent score with a 104, and he was only one of 3 Bulldogs to hit the ton. Took a couple of kick-ins, I think, and just roamed around doing as he liked. That's what you want to see if you've got him. Gold Coast Melbourne on Saturday. Game was over at quarter time. The Suns blew them out of the park, and then Melbourne just sort of found their way back in it across the next 3 quarters. But I think realistically it was always going to be a win to the Gold Coast from that first quarter. And Sam Flanders continues to show signs of fantasy life again. He's finding the ball a lot more now. He scored 90 on the weekend, another 28 touches, and he's still just playing as that half forward. So maybe Dimmer was right. Hardwick the other week said the bye would freshen him up. He's looked very good since. Braden Fiorini scored a 98 and has had 3 nice scores in a row now. He's an interesting player, Fiorini, because we know he can score and he could be a fantasy gun in the right role. He's come back to the senior side and just played predominantly on that wing, as we've seen. But the last couple of weeks he's seen a little bit of centre bounce action. And I just thought that was interesting. If they start to include him in the occasional centre bounce, he might be able to be a pretty handy scorer for you. Matty Rao, 5 tons in a row now. It's 107 on the weekend, and it's pretty exciting. He's always been a bit of a nilly player in keeper leagues, Rao, and he's putting it all together. And the interesting thing is, and it's the interesting thing, it's also the concerning thing. So he's done 5 tons in a row despite only taking 7 marks in that 5-week period. Now, we've talked a lot, it's been talked about a lot with Rao that he doesn't take marks. And my concern with him as a fantasy prospect is, if he doesn't lay 10 tackles, if he doesn't get 30 touches, how's he going to build his score? But he's done it 5 weeks in a row now, and yeah, you just think as he continues to age and mature, he'll find more outside ball. He could still end up being one of the better fantasy scorers going around if he can get all those columns, the tackles, the touches, and then the marks. For Melbourne, Big Maxi Gawn scored an 89. He missed the ton for the first time since round 4. That's 10 tons in a row he was on a streak of. And no surprise, it was up against Jared Witts that he fell. So nothing really other just pointing out how good Gawney's been, and he's human. Jake Melksham, not sure where this score came from. He put up a 128. He kicked 4 goals 5 playing on Mac Andrew. I've always liked Melksham and thought he's always been a pretty decent player. But I'll be honest, I didn't think he was the sort of player that could have 9 shots on goal in a game, particularly at this point of his career. So surely one out of the box. I guess we'll just keep an eye on him in the next few weeks if something's changed there, but I think he just had a brilliant game. That's all I really had for Melbourne. They didn't have a great game. Something I looked at, though, that I thought was interesting, just that CBA mix, the centre bounce mix that Melbourne had on the weekend reminds me of what Carlton were doing. And I don't know, I wonder if it's working. So what I'm saying is it's a very, very tight group. You've got, obviously, Gawn, and then you've got 3 of Petrarca, Oliver, Pickett, Viney, and that's it, pretty much for the whole game. So it just doesn't leave a lot of room for variation or mixing it up. And Ed Langdon tagged Noah Anderson and did a really good job, I believe, early in the game. But he did the tag starting at half forward and then pushing up and leaving Will Powell loose at half back, which in itself is an odd thing to do. And now Powell didn't have an amazing game, but geez, if he's left loose, he could be quite damaging. So if Langdon was going to tag Anderson, why wouldn't he start at the centre? Anyway, I'm not sure. I just found it a little weird. You don't often see such tight mixes like that, and Carlton have had a little bit similar earlier in the year. Hawthorn North Melbourne was probably the most disappointing game, really, of the round in terms of really felt like North Melbourne... it's a blip, but I felt like North were better than performances like that at this stage. But, credit to Hawks. They just put the foot down from the start. Not a lot to take out of this game. Such was the one-sided nature of it. But Dylan Moore owners are going to feel robbed of a big score thanks to the sub at three-quarter time. He was on 74. Hawks were smashing North, and obviously Hawks just thought, let's give him a bit of a rest more. There'd been talk of him having some sort of issue at training earlier in the week, and yeah, it makes sense. But I think the point of this is don't look at that score and think he isn't back, because he's on a really good run now, Moore, playing off his half-forward, up-the-ground role. He's put together a lot of decent scores in a row now, and 74 looks ugly, but that was his three-quarter time score. Josh Weddle, it's pretty frustrating as an owner. Just when I thought he could be trusted on field, Weddle. And yeah, looks like he was more locked down in this game. Maybe it was a case of the ball just didn't come down his end that much, but he shut Cam Zurhaar out of the game pretty well. They moved him forward in the last quarter, but he didn't kick any goals, didn't really hit the scoreboard, and finished with a 41. For North, not much to really look at. Just Harry Sheasel played half forward in the first half, and I wonder... Well, look, we've got to be careful sometimes as fantasy fans making judgments on players and where coaches put them based on how much it impacts their ability to score points for our fantasy teams. But I really do have to wonder why Sheasel was playing half forward, and he was only moved on the ball after Wardlaw went down, unfortunately with another concussion. I didn't watch Clarko's presser after the game, and it's something I'll probably look for this week. But why? Why did they put him at half forward and not involve him, especially when they were getting smashed? Anyway, not a great score for him, but I put that down to where they played him rather than the player himself. Saturday night, I got to watch this game from start to finish, which was great. And it's funny, I was having a chat with a mate in the lead up to the game about the fixturing, just how Collingwood versus West Coast at Marvel would ever have really sounded like a good idea for Saturday night footy. But you just never know, and that's what I love about this league and footy itself. On paper, boring game, sat down and watched it and thought it was just an awesome battle between 1st and 18th. And even though the Eagles were probably never going to upset them, Pies are just too good and we're always going to hold them off. I just loved what I saw from West Coast. I thought they played so well. And most of my player notes are on West Coast players. The only Pie I wanted to talk about was Lipinski, who backed up last week's big effort with another good score, another really good performance. So he had the big 120 last week, and he went 83 again this week, playing wing half forward. I've always been a fan of Lipinski. I've always felt like he has more to give in the fantasy world, and maybe he's about to go on a bit of a run to finish this season strong. But on to West Coast, who, like I said, blew me away with how well they played. Quite unlucky in the end. They missed a few chances at crucial times, and Collingwood, too good. Brady Hoff, spoken about him a lot this year, how he's moved into the midfield and his scoring is very up and down. Now, they set him an interesting task, it seems, this week. It was play on Nick Dacos, don't tag him, just play on him, and beat him the other way. Can you imagine how daunting that would be? All right, I'm going to go play on Nick Dacos. My job is to play better than him. I mean, that's a hard task, but I thought he looked great. He played really well. He had 27 touches at 100% disposal efficiency, Hoff, and yeah, I thought it was a really good game, scored 93. Now, on the flip side, Dacos killed it, as he does, and the discussion around tag or don't tag was a curious one when it sounded like they weren't going to tag him. But as good as Dacos was, I think it showed you can play Collingwood and not tag Dacos as long as your guys are doing enough going the other way. And for most part of this game, they were. Clay Hall is, his third game back? Oh, second game. So I think he was the sub last week. Yeah, he was the sub last week, looked good when he came on. Got a full game this week, took plenty of centre bounces and scored 79. I really like the look of him. He's one of those guys, he doesn't look like a 20-year-old. Every time I saw him, I'm like, was he a mature age recruit? Is he in his mid-20s? No, he's still 20, but he just looks older. He plays older too. I reckon they've got a really good player there. And speaking of really good players, Tom McCarthy. So he debuted last week, or week before their bye, debuted with a ton, 31 touches. And I think we're all wondering, is this a flash in a pan score from McCarthy? And I can tell you it most certainly was not. He put up a 95, another 29 touches to go with the 31 in his first game. And now he shared the kick-ins this week. Duggan had a fair bit as well. But I just thought McCarthy looked good. Not just because he's racking up points in fantasy, but he just looks like a good player. He looked composed. He made the right choices coming out of D50. and I think they're looking for him. So he's a very exciting prospect for a keeper league, and those who jumped early, and I'm talking the guys who grabbed him the second he was taken with pick 1 in the mid-season draft, you're being rewarded very handsomely. 2 games in, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but on the evidence, you'd be pretty stoked. Ryan Marrick had a nice bounce-back game. He's been just scoring 60s since he got moved up to the wing. But he was very involved in this game. I noticed him a lot, and he scored a 97, which I think would be good for those holding on to him. And then, lastly, Liam Baker, 117 he put out in what has to have been his best game as an Eagle. He had 35 touches, laid 6 tackles, and you just felt his presence and his impact on the game when West Coast were really firing hard at Collingwood, and you were thinking, how is the bottom side doing this? It was guys like Baker, that experience and that toughness. That's what you need to compete with Collingwood, and I think it was a great game from Baker. On to the 2 Sunday games. We start at the MCG, Richmond and Adelaide. As a Crows fan, I was very happy to sit at the G and enjoy this one. It was Adelaide pretty much from the start. But for Richmond, Sam Banks continues to impress. I know he had a poorer score the week before, but a 105 this week. And I just love it. It was really cool seeing him up close, being at the game. Him and actually Tom Brown, I thought, did some nice things as well. But yeah, Banks in that role, I think that's just a lock. And even with Jaden Short, who might even return next week, I just think Banks keeps that spot and they put Short in next to him or elsewhere. I think they've just got to keep going with Banks in that role. Tom Lynch had a pretty bad day at the office, and I only bring it up because his halftime score was just something to behold. He was on -15 at halftime, thanks to no touches and 5 frees against. And I think we're all kind of thinking that's got to be the worst halftime score we've ever seen. And shout out to Jaden Popowski, the stats man on X, who posted the list of the worst scores at halftime, only going back to 2014. And Lynch was very much the worst, with the next worst being -9 for Jack Darling, which was this season. Anyway, I think there's been enough said about Lynch and the day he had, so moving on to the Crows. And we land on the Finders Keepers Player of the Week, and it's pretty bloody exciting that it's Dan Curtin with a 118 on the back of 26 touches, 15 kicks, 11 handballs, 8 marks, 5 tackles, and 2 goals, all in career game 22. Wow, he's been building for weeks now, and his scoring has reflected that. He's 5-6 weeks in the 70, north of 70, playing on the wing, but moving up and down, taking big marks in the forward line, and just being involved all over the ground. He's developing at a very, very nice rate, and with forward status would be very, very exciting for anyone who either grabbed him at the start of this nice run or more recently, or have just had him for the whole time. He's would be a chance to win the Rising Star. He's having that good a year. Isaac Rankin saw his centre bounce attendances drop again slightly this week, and even though he scored 82, I just felt like this could have really been a ceiling game for him, and I kind of expected more. The Crows had no shortage of fantasy scores on the day. They really owned the footy and I think had 7 tons in the end. Just thought this was the sort of game Rankin would tear apart. And he didn't play bad, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, kind of expecting a little bit more from him. I mean, it's hard to be disappointed with his output this year. I'm trying to work out what he's going to be. Is he going to be, a real high scorer who accumulates, or is he just going to be more of a, an impact guy? I thought he was going to accumulate a bit more. Anyway, he's having a fine year. Just curious to see if he can go to another level. And lastly, Max Michelini had a very interesting role change in this game. Now, we've seen him tried in the midfield as a bit of a tagger, run with guy, and I've not really loved him in that role. As a Crows fan anyway, I think he's much better off reading the play and intercepting and being a general in the back line. But what the Crows did was really interesting. They played him forward as a defensive role on Floston. And the idea was that he would just, quell Floston's influence, which he did. But he also kicked 3 goals. And pretty nice goals, one from the square, but the other 2 were set shots that he just hit beautifully, like he'd been playing forward all his life. So I don't think he's going to be a permanent forward or anything like that, but it's pretty cool to see the Crows have that as an option if they need to lock down on someone. Like I think about a Tom Stewart who for years has destroyed Adelaide. Perhaps next time the two play, Michelini can go and do a similar role on him, and if he can hit the scoreboard as well, that's a bonus. The last game, Freo St Kilda, and I was able to catch the last quarter of this one, which was great because it was a close game, and saw a really strong quarter of footy from Freo, who came from behind to beat the Sainers, who I thought put up a pretty good show as well. I think this game was the best display of Luke Jackson and Sean Darcy as a partnership. I'm sure there's been games in the past where one of the two have had better games, but as a unit and how much they impacted the game, particularly in the last quarter, which is all I watched, I think this is the best we've seen them play together, and I think Freo would be absolutely pumped to see it. So Jackson scored 107, Sean Darcy a 99, both scored really well. And it was Darcy who played as the main ruck. The ruck contest split for the game was 70-30 in Darcy's favour. CBAs were a little closer than that. But it was particularly in the last quarter when Darcy was the main man, and I thought he dominated Rowan Marshall in that last quarter, which allowed Jackson to do what he does well and impact the game in the forward half. Took some really good marks. That last mark he took to seal the game too was just awesome stuff. So, really good for Sean Darcy owners in particular, because it's not been a fun couple of years owning him. So to see him return to playing that sort of way would be very, very heartening. Caleb Sarong scored a 62, and when I was looking into the game today to find out, how does Sarong score 62 on the back of a couple of huge scoring weeks for him, and I thought, well, Windhager obviously tagged him into the ground, which is what Windhager does pretty well. But it wasn't the case. There was no tag on Sarong. In fact, Windhager wasn't in the middle at all. He wasn't tagging at all. He played half forward, didn't even attend a single centre bounce. So Sarong's 62 I'm not sure what the story was. I think the Saints midfield just kind of beat up on Freo for most of the game. Nat Fyfe was the starting sub after getting a start last week, and it's pretty sad. I think just that I was hoping we could see a little bit more of Fyfe before he's done, and he's actually got some calf issue that's emerged at half time. So they never even brought him on, and now he's out for 3 to 4 weeks. So fingers crossed we can see him again later in the year, but the outlook isn't too promising for the champion that he is. For St Kilda, I was really excited to see Hugo Garcia called back into the side. He's been doing really well in the VFL, and I just feel like he's someone that if they let him play, he can score. He played on the ball, had plenty of centre bounces, only put up a 67, but I think he was pretty involved and really impacted the game, particularly in the first half when the Saints were were getting on top. Windhager I spoke about, scored that 81 as a half forward, but no centre bounces for him. Max Hall scored an 88, and I just wanted to mention him. I've really liked him this year. His first year, his scoring has made him hard to roster, probably in most leagues. Certainly couldn't field him. But this was a nice reward for those who have seen the potential in him and have held him, grabbed him and held him. To get an 88 is pretty good. Alex Toru in his second game, I mean, anyone who watched this game, or even just the last quarter that I watched, would just be blown away how good this kid looks. And he scored 48. He's still a key defender. And, you know, we may not talk about him in the fantasy world with any relevance for some time. But in his second game, I mean, he looked good last week. He looked even better this week. His spoiling, his second efforts. And, I think Security have absolutely got themselves one there. And I'd be surprised if he left the side anytime soon. And I'll finish with another first-year Saint who was taken early in the draft as well, who we had pretty high hopes for in scoring-wise, and that's Toby Travalia, who I think has played his role pretty well and had a decent debut season. But on the weekend, there were really good signs. He was on 50 at halftime. Now, he's finished on 63 when he slowed clearly in that second half. But anytime you see a player put on 50 and a half, you know something's there. So Travalia owners probably haven't seen too much fantasy-wise, but that was a good sign. And a sign of things to come, I think. All right, looking at the waiver wire pickups for this week. And it's an interesting time of the year for waiver pickups. What are we at? Round 17. So you're probably looking at your team. You know, you may be out of contention this year, which drastically changes who you're targeting if you're going after anyone on the waiver wire. You're no longer interested in older guys who are scoring well and can put together a run. You're really now just looking for young guys that, doesn't have to be young, but guys that are having role changes you can see being really good next year. And then on the flip side, if you're fighting for a flag, you know, you're going to start to look a little bit less at the younger prospects and really focus on guys who can just put together a good 6 to 8 week run. And then, you know, guys you'd be happy to then delist once they've hopefully taken you to the flag. Now, this is why it becomes interesting, because let's say you're in a 10-team league, you look at your ladder now, the two sides on the bottom, maybe they can't make finals. And then the two sides at the top, they can't miss finals, something like that. So now when you're looking at the pool, instead of, you know, competing with 9 teams for a young prospect, or competing with 9 teams for an older guy who's got a new lease on life and scoring well again, you're not competing with the same amount of teams for the players. So this means you don't have to be as aggressive with using your waivers, and maybe you can get guys for free just as a free agent pickup afterwards. It changes a little bit as we hit this back end of the year, because the other thing you got to consider too is, and this is something I struggle with, even as a side that's competing right now, I can't not look at young talent and get excited. But you've got to think about, if you're going to use a pick on that guy, is he going to help you win the flag this year? And are you even going to carry him into next year? Will he make your final cut? So it's just a different time of year where you got to start thinking about things a little bit differently to, say, you know, round 4 or 5, when it's just a free fall. You're going for any sort of player. Anyway, all that being said, let's have a look at the players I put up last week, see how they went. And I'll just give you the hot tip straight off the bat. They didn't go well. So this isn't going to be the most fun last week review I've done. Logan Morris, well, he had a bye, so that's fine. But if he's still sitting there, grab him now, because there would have been people who liked him and wanted him but couldn't afford to pick up a bye guy. So if he's still there in your league, I'd be grabbing him. I also put up Luke McDonald, who put together a pretty good run. And yeah, look, like many of the Kangaroos on the weekend, he just didn't get near it. The roll looked pretty similar, but he scored a 43. And yeah, I think you can quite safely let him back into the pool now. Daniel Turner for Melbourne is another guy I said could be pretty good. I liked him playing forward, but he went back to the back line and had his hands full with Jed Walter this week, put up a 57. Sam Butler for Hawthorn. Look, it was disappointing he didn't get amongst it in what was a very big win for Hawthorn. He scored 36, but it's only his third game back, and yeah, I think if you put the investment into him last week, he's worth holding for another look this week. And then lastly, Corey Wagner was a bit of a dart throw, we'll call it. I just liked the fact that he sometimes plays in the middle, but this weekend he just played in the back line and was quiet with a 53. I reckon hold him. I think he could bounce back from that, and even looking at the fixture, Freo have got Sydney this week, so do they look at having him run with a Heaney, perhaps, which would get him in the midfield and around the ball more. So that was last week. Not much to write home about there, but that's okay. Let's see what I can do this week with my 5 picks. And I start with Joe Richards for Port Adelaide. He's someone I'd definitely use a waiver pick on. His form, his scoring, and his prospects for the future, he kind of ticks them all. So I'd be pretty happy to have a go at him. The next few, it's at that point of the year, do you need to use a waiver pick? Can you wait and grab them? But Lockie Bramble has put up 2 good ones in a row, playing that nice role off halfback for the Doggies. It's just, we've seen this before and then he drops again. So, yeah, maybe grab him. But, yeah, if your league's not that deep, maybe have another look first. Braden Fiorini, I'm pretty happy to nominate him. I've always been a big fan of his. I always get quite excited when he's back. But as I mentioned in the game notes earlier, he's had a little bit of a look at the centre bouncers the last couple of weeks, and I think his scoring is pretty decent. I think he could do a lot worse. And he's a guy that if he ever gets a long run on the ball, he can rack it up big time. Aaron Norton is... look, he's someone I've had faith in for a long time. And I remember when Darcy got injured earlier in the year, I thought this is Norton's chance to really step up, and he didn't really do it. Now, on the weekend against Sydney, Darcy started like a house on fire and then was shut out, and Norton had a huge game. So he'll be quite popular this weekend on the waiver picks because he's got a 120 score next to his name. I reckon he's worth having a go at, not just because he scored a 120, but I've always believed he's got a good game in him. And maybe, just maybe, that is the game that gives him the confidence to go on with it and become more consistent and be like, so many of the other young key forwards in the game who are pretty safe 70s at worst. He's also got North Melbourne this week, and, all going well, he could have a big one again. The last one is Clay Hall. I'm really bullish on this guy. I've liked what I've seen. The young West Coast mid. They're giving him a run on the ball. Yes, he's probably only a bad game away from maybe going back to the 2s, but, they've got to play these kids and see what they've got. And so far, so good, the last fortnight for Hall. So I'd be pretty happy to have a crack at him as well. Now, just quickly, I've gone a little deeper for those playing in leagues that are so deep that there is nothing on the waivers other than scraps. So I've just tried to find 3 names, not 5 this week, just going with the 3. It's getting harder and harder to come up with these names, let me tell you. But these guys, could be worth a go. Jack Williams for West Coast. Now, he's put together 3 scores of 60 in a row. It's obviously not very much. But watching him on Saturday night against, the likes of Jeremy Howe, Darcy Moore, those sorts of defenders, I actually really liked him. I think he's starting to really become not a commanding presence, but a presence in that forward line. And I wouldn't be surprised if he finished the year with some nice scores and turned into something in the future. For North, Robert Hansen Jr. was the sub again, and they've used him as a sub a lot this year. I don't know a lot about him, but he comes onto the ground and he brings energy and a bit of dash. And on the weekend, he scored 45 in just the 49% time on ground when he came on for George Wardlaw. And who knows? He might get more of a run. He looks okay. And then the last one is a real Hail Mary, but Lockie Cowan, I just refuse to give up on. He could return for Carlton this week, and I still think there's a fantasy game in him. And Carlton are just, they're at all sorts at the moment, aren't they? So get him in, give him a role at half-back in the back line. He scored 84 in round one. I still hold hope that he can do that again. And we'll move on to the listener questions for this week, of which there are quite a few, which is great. So don't forget, you can send your questions through on X at FindKeepAFL. You can chuck them on the wall, or you can send me a message as well if you want your question read out on the pod. And don't forget, you can send through trades, which a few people have done this week. I love it when I get people sending in trades from their leagues, and I can sort of pull them apart and not necessarily work out who's the winner and loser out of a trade. I think that's too tricky to do without the help of hindsight. But it's fun to just look at what people out there are doing and the strategy involved as well with trading. So at Collingron1, which is Cameron on X, he actually sent this through the week before last, so apologies, Cameron, because last week I had Free Kick Liam on, and we went well and truly over time, and I had to push the question to this week. So here it is. It's a trade. Have a gander at this trade, Jordox. And it's between a rebuilding side and a contending side. Rebuilding side has acquired Nasiah Wanganeen-Millera, Jasper Fletcher, Ned Long, and a second and third round pick. The contending side gets Luke Jackson, James Peatling, Carl Amon, Ollie Wines, and a fifth round pick. It's a 12-team league, and they keep 16 at the end of the year. I think quite quickly I know which side I'd rather be in terms of receiving, and that's the rebuilding side. To get Wanganeen-Millera, firstly, is awesome. But to add in Jasper Fletcher, who I reckon's a touch underrated, and Ned Long, who's obviously been great this year and is still young. And then look at what you've given up. Luke Jackson is a big one to give up, and he's entering his absolute prime. I mean, his form has been so good. But the other guys are very much the sort of players you'd want as a contender. Amon, he's been great off halfback. Ollie Wines has been scoring well. Not necessarily someone you're going to keep. And Peatling, I think, is going to be good for a few years yet as well. So, pretty big trade. And I think, look, if I had to pick one, it would be getting Wanganeen-Millera with Fletcher and Long and those picks for sure. But both sides should be happy, and hopefully the side that picked up Jackson can go on and win the flag. Thanks for that one, Cameron. That's a really good trade. At Hawkers Heroes, a big supporter of the podcast, thanks mate, has put through just a trade he pulled off in pre-season that I reckon he's pretty keen to gloat about, which is what it's all about at the end of the day. So Hawker has sent this through. AC is pretty happy with this one. So he picked up Joel Freyer, pick 83, pick 95, and he gave up Ari Schonmaker, as well as picks 49 and 52. So Freya for Schonmaker with some pretty favourable pick swaps as the sweetener. I mean, obviously, looking at that now, you would be laughing, Hawker, picking up Freya, he had 77 average as a second-year player, is looking unreal. Sean Maker, I get the appeal. I was quite interested in him in pre-season, and it's not like it's done for him. But right now, that's an absolute win for you. Actually, the picks, see who they used him on. So pick 83.95, which Hawker got. He used on Josh Battle and Jack Stringer. Battle's been okay. Stringer hasn't got going as a Giant yet. And then the other guy who had the better picks used 49 on Windhager. I think it's a great pick. And 52 on Dangerfield, who I think has been pretty good as a forward option this year as well. But well done, Hawker. That's a good one. Thanks for sending it through. Now, Matt on X has sent through this one. This is quite big. So some big Keeper League trades this week. I'm trying to win the flag after 3 years of rebuilding. So youth is out and match winners are in. All right, let's see what Matt's done. He's traded in Bontempelli, Liberatore, and a second round pick. And he's given up McKercher, Flanders, Long, Davidson, and a second round pick. All right. Oh, gee. Look, Bontempelli, yeah, okay, that's your match winner. And Libba's been good too. But McKercher and Flanders and Long, I reckon you've gone a little bit harsh there. McKercher, it's interesting. I wonder when you did this trade. Was this before McKercher picked up that half-back role and started to score again? Or is this a case of you know exactly what you're giving up, you just really want to win the flag? Either way, I reckon you've given up too much there. And then the other one is Jackson, McRae, Petrarca, Doherty, Lipinski, Mitch Duncan. Well, there's 5 big names there. And you've given up Rankin, Levi Ashcroft, Joel Freyer, Sean Manor, Harvey Langford, and a first-round pick. Oh, yeah, you've absolutely gone for it, Matt. I don't know. I don't know about some of those names. Levi Ashcroft, Harvey Langford, looking pretty good. But let's focus on what you got in. McRae, Lipinski, there's 2 forwards that can help you very much this year. Petrarca, Doherty could pick up defender status. He's looking good. Mitch Duncan, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have included him, but he's there. I reckon you've gone too hard again with that one, but clearly you've just gone for it and you are very keen on getting the flag. I reckon you've sold too much there, but Matt, I truly hope it takes you to the premiership, because end of the day, that is what we're here to play for. And I hope it all comes off for you. Thanks for sending them through. Some big trades there from Matt. Over to Big Red at Mortar Ted on X. This is for a categories league. Now, I will confess I'm not that familiar with categories leagues. I mean, I know how they run and how they work. I've just never played in one, and my feel for them isn't what it would be if we were just talking point scoring. But anyway, let's have a look at what's happened here. So Big Red sent this trade in from his league, and he's explained both teams were competing for top 4 finishes. Team 1 was shallow for forwards, and Team 2 a touch shallow in defenders, and had lost patience with Hayden Young's hammies. Ooh, all right. Let's have a look. Team 1 receives... now, it says Cunnington, but he doesn't play anymore. I'm going to assume you meant Cunningham for the Swans. So Cunningham and Hayden Young in exchange for Tom Stewart. Now, on the surface, I don't like it. I don't think Hayden Young should be given up on just yet. And look, Tom Stewart's been better since he's come back, but he's still a nervy own, I think. But having said that, this is a categories league, and it is a bit different. So the only thing I don't get is Team 1 was shallow for forwards. He hasn't actually picked up a forward there. Anyway, Hayden Young and Cunningham for Tom Stewart. Look, I'd be keeping Young if it were me, but Tom Stewart could certainly finish this year and even next year with a big bang. So he's a good get. I just wouldn't have given up Hayden Young for him. Thanks, Big Red. That's a good one. On to the last question now, and then I'll wrap up the pod. At JLV on X has written in. Now, this is a single season draft question, and even though this is a Keeper Dynasty podcast, I do welcome questions about single season draft as well. It's something else I'm quite passionate about and love playing, and there's some pretty clear differences between the two, but there's also a lot of parallels in what we're looking for in players and trends and the roles they have. So I think it's quite relevant. It's a good question too. Who do you like the most as a trade-in target for a single season draft league for the rest of the year? So he's got Sidebottom with the question mark of arrest, Neil with the tag, or Tom Atkins Jag. Jag is just a guy, which is made famous by the Draft Doctors podcast, which I'm a big fan of as well. Tom Atkins is a Jag, but he's a good Jag. He plays a really good role, tackles hard. Sidebottom is like, I don't understand what's happening with him, Pendlebury, Crisp. They're just dominating, and I don't know how. But I think I land on Lockie Neal. I think I just feel safer and more excited if it comes to Sunday and I'm in a head-to-head and I've got Neal. I just feel a little bit more confident that he could get me a match-winning score over the other two. The only problem with that is it's probably going to be harder to get a trade done because he has the name factor. But that's who I'd be going for, JLV. Hopefully you can go for one of them and get them, and they take you to the promised land of a draft premiership. Thanks for the question. Thanks to everyone that sent them through. Really awesome seeing them all this week. And keep on sending them through. I really enjoy seeing how others are playing the game, and you get a feel for that when you see how people are trading. But that's it for this week. Time to wrap up this episode of Finders Keepers. And just a reminder, if you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you've liked and subscribed wherever you're listening to it. And if you're so inclined, maybe leave a review. And I always find it funny listening to podcasts and they will say, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. And yeah, I mean, if you leave a review, I'd be pretty keen on it being a 5-star review, but I'd also like you to be honest. And if it's not 5 stars, don't give it 5 stars. But leave a review if you're enjoying it, and send through any feedback. Getting towards the home stretch of the first season of Finders Keepers, and looking forward to spending the off season really trying to refine this podcast and get it to a really high standard for those of you who listen and tune in every week, which is greatly appreciated. So any feedback I get will help me do that. That's it. All done. Another round gone. We have round 17 coming up, and it's just crazy how quick this year has gone. I'm actually away with the family next weekend, which is going to be great, but probably won't watch as much footy as maybe I'd like to. Anyway, I'll be back next week. I'll somehow find a way to get this pod recorded and ready for your ears next Tuesday. So have a good week. I hope you get all the waiver wire players you desire. I hope all your sides have victories on the weekend. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. But in the meantime, I'm Jordox. This has been Finders Keepers. And until next time, keep on keeping on.